All right, have you ever really thought about what happens in those few seconds right after you hit the power button? I mean, it seems like magic, right? Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain. We're talking about the boot manager. It's like the unsung hero that wakes your computer up. And we're going to focus on a real classic, the Grand Unified Bootloader, which you probably know as GRUB.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll walk through the entire boot-up journey from start to finish. Then we'll introduce GRUB Legacy and its much more modern successor, grub.2. After that, we'll get our hands dirty with installation and, how to actually use it. And to wrap things up, we'll go over some pro tips for really mastering your boot setup. Let's dive in.
First on our list is the boot-up journey. We're going to demystify that seemingly magical moment between you hitting the power button and your desktop finally appearing. What's really going on under the hood?
It feels like it happens in an instant, but it's actually this complex, super high-speed chain of events. Think of it like a carefully choreographed dance between your hardware and your software. And right at the center of it all is a critical piece of code we almost never think about.
And that piece of code? That's the bootloader. Its job is simple, but it is absolutely essential. Find the brain of the operating system, the kernel, load it into the computer's memory, and then just hand over control. The orchestra conductor analogy is just perfect. It doesn't play a single instrument, but without it, there's no music, just silence.
So, how does this whole dance unfold? Well, it all starts with your system's firmware, the BIOS or UEFI, which runs a quick check on all your hardware. Then it looks at the very, very beginning of your hard drive, a tiny section called the Master Boot Record, or MBR. In that MBR is the first tiny part of GRUB. That part's only job is to load the rest of GRUB, which then shows you that familiar boot menu and loads the Linux kernel you pick.
Now let's meet our first character in this story, GRUB Legacy. For a long, long time, this was the go-to bootloader for just about every Linux system out there. So let's see how it worked.
So GRUB has actually been around since 1995. It was a huge step up from older bootloaders like Lilo. But as technology marched on, something more powerful and more flexible was needed. And that led to a total rewrite, which gave us the birth of grub.2 back in 2005.
The whole philosophy behind GRUB Legacy was direct manual control. You literally just opened up a text file called /boot/grub/menu.lst and made your changes. And that was it. What you saw was exactly what you got. No hidden steps, no automatic scripts running in the background.
And the structure of that file? Super straightforward. Every boot option had a title, which is just the text you'd see on the menu. A root line to tell GRUB which hard drive partition to look in, a kernel line pointing to the kernel file itself, and an init.rd line for something called the initial RAM disk, which is basically a temporary file system used during the boot process.
Okay, but here's the classic trap, the #1 gotcha that trips everyone up with GRUB Legacy. You ready? It counts partitions starting from 0. So if you see HD0, 1, your brain says first disk, first partition. Nope, it actually means the second partition on that first disk. I'm telling you, this one little detail has caused so many headaches for so many people over the years.
All right, let's fast forward to the modern era with GRUB2. It takes a completely different approach, one that's way more powerful and, well, a lot more automated.
And this slide just nails the core difference perfectly. With GRUB Legacy, you were the chef, writing the recipe out by hand. With grub.2, you're more like a restaurant owner who just sets the menu preferences. You tweak settings in a few helper files, run a command, and then a script automatically generates the final complex recipe for you.
Now that final configuration file is grub/grub.cfg. And I really can't stress this enough. You should never, ever edit this file by hand. Seriously, don't touch it. It's completely auto-generated, which means any changes you make manually will just get completely wiped out the next time the configuration is updated.
So how do you make changes in grub.2? It's really just a simple 3-step process. First, you edit some helper files for your settings. Then, you run a single command. That's it. GRUB automatically writes the final grub.cfg file for you. It's designed this way to be much safer and way more predictable.
All right, enough theory. Let's get practical. Let's talk about how you can actually install, update, and interact with GRUB to get it to do what you want.
This here is the foundational command. grub-install takes the GRUB bootloader and writes it to a specific spot, usually the master boot record of your main hard drive, which is often /dev/sta. This is the command that makes your disk bootable in the first place.
And this is the command that brings all your grub2 changes to life. So after you've tweaked your settings in /etc default/grub, you just run update grub. This little utility scans your whole system for operating systems and kernels, pulls in your custom settings, and generates a brand new grub.cfg file from scratch.
You know, grub isn't just some static menu you have to watch scroll by, it's actually interactive. When the menu pops up, you can use the arrow keys to pick an OS, sure, but the real power is pressing E to temporarily edit the boot commands for an entry. This is perfect for, say, testing a quick kernel parameter. And if things go really, really wrong, pressing C drops you into a full-on grub command line shell, which is an incredibly powerful tool for recovery.
Okay, let's wrap this up by talking about what to do when things go wrong, and, more importantly, how to stop them from going wrong in the first place.
Oh, it's that moment every single computer user dreads. You hit the power button and nothing. Just a blinking cursor on a black screen. A broken bootloader is very often the culprit. But here's the good news. It's almost always fixable.
The recovery process is pretty standard, really. You'll need to boot your computer from a live USB stick. From that live environment, you mount your main system's hard drive partition. Then you use a cool command called chroot. What this does is it lets you temporarily operate inside your broken system, but from the safety of the live USB. And once you're in there, you just rerun grub-install to fix the bootloader.
So let's just recap the key differences all in one place. With GRUB Legacy, you directly edit menu.lst. For grub2, you edit some helper files and then run update grub to generate the grub.config file. And please don't forget that critical difference in numbering. GRUB Legacy starts counting partitions from 0, while grub2 starts from 1. That'll save you a headache, I promise.
So, here are the 3 golden rules to walk away with. 1. Always back up before you start messing with your boot configuration. 2. For grub2, just use the proper workflow. Edit the right files, then run update grub. And 3. Keep a bootable live USB stick somewhere safe. Seriously, it's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card.
You see, understanding the boot process isn't just about fixing things when they break. It's really about taking control. It opens the door to multi-booting different operating systems, to testing custom kernels, to truly understanding your machine right from the moment you apply power. You now hold the keys. The only question left is, what are you going to unlock?